Self-directed education is a tough concept for many people to grasp. It challenges the ways in which many of us were educated and the ways many of our children continue to be educated. It flips the entire idea of education from a top-down model of coercive schooling to a bottom-up model of individual agency and self-empowerment. My 2019 book, Unschooled, Raising Curious, Well-Educated Children Outside of a Conventional Classroom, details the history and philosophy of non-coercive, self-directed education tied to one's individual interests, goals, and life pursuits. It also shows what self-directed education looks like in practice, including in various self-directed learning centers and schools around the world, as well as among the many families who embrace self-directed education as their approach to homeschooling. One place that has been a beacon for parents and educators interested in the philosophy and practice of self-directed education is the Sudbury Valley School that I wrote about extensively in Unschooled. Sudbury Valley was founded in Framingham, Massachusetts in 1968 and continues to flourish today more than 50 years later. It has also inspired the creation of dozens of Sudbury-model schools around the world, as well as various unschooling programs. If you remember back to episode 39 of this podcast in October, I interviewed Sudbury Valley School co-founder Mimsy Sadovsky and explained why my husband and I decided to send our children to Sudbury Valley School. But today, I thought it would be interesting and insightful to hear from another parent, Nick Warren, who pulled his two children out of public school in 2021 and enrolled them in Sudbury Valley School. Like me, Nick and his wife drive a long distance each way every day so that their kids can go to Sudbury Valley, but it's totally worth it for all of us. We'll talk more about why that is in today's show. Nick Warren, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Carrie.
It's so great to have you here. I'm just so interested in sort of your story and your pathway toward Sudbury Valley School and self-directed education, especially coming from a conventional classroom. Your girls were both in public schools. And I wonder if we could maybe start there before we talk about why you chose Sudbury Valley School. Why did you choose public school for them in the beginning?
Well, I think like a lot of people, it was just the thing that we did. We didn't put much thought into it. Initially, our younger schools, our middle schools and elementary schools were really good in the town I live in. So they just had this great reputation and the teachers were amazing. So just even when the kids started school, it was a positive experience and the girls had fun. And it really didn't cross our mind because we felt like we were in a good school system. That lasted till about middle school. And then, things popped up on the radar to make some changes. But that's how we ended up just going right down the road of public school.
And so the disruption caused by the COVID response really was what prompted you to start looking for a change. But even before that, and we can talk about how that impacted your decision making, but even before 2020, you mentioned as the girls were kind of heading into the middle school years, what were you starting to notice that maybe became less desirable about your local district schools?
Yeah, great question. So my oldest daughter was fine. She was a typical kid that flourishes in the public school model. She loves rules. She loves reading. So she was the student of the month, fit right in, had no problems. She wasn't overly excited and happy, but she was doing well as far as they're concerned. My youngest started to go down the same road I did in school, where I was a distraction if I didn't have the right teacher. So I was one of the kids that couldn't sit still. I like to talk. I, had all the ear markings of a bunch of initials that they like to label people with. So our first radar up was when the school brought us in to say that she has ADHD and that she, is eligible for certain concessions and all these things to help her learn. And I just remember leaving that meeting with the teacher and the school psychologist and my wife, and I was just like, I just felt like they labeled her that because she wasn't doing well in school or fitting the model. I mean, I don't know any other, because I was the same kid, I knew that if it was interesting and the teacher accepted who I was, I learned fine. There wasn't any issues with picking up the curriculum or anything else. But personally, when I was treated like a distraction, that's exactly what I became. And we just started going down the same road with her. And it just didn't really make any sense. I didn't feel like the school was in a position to be diagnosing my kid. I feel like the labels that are used are just an excuse and an easy way to kind of push people into containers. So that really got our radar up. And then that rolled us right into the whole pandemic thing, which just kind of blew it up.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think there is certainly this tendency today to label kids with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, especially younger children, kindergarten age even, who are not sitting still and listening to the teacher. In fact, there was a study that came out by Harvard researchers back in the fall of 2018, where they looked at rates of ADHD and corresponding links to kindergarten enrollment age cutoff dates. So they found that kids who were turning 5 years old in August, and that would be among the earliest kids, the youngest kids in their grade for kindergarten based on the age cutoff, were more than 30% more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than students who were born in September and were almost 6 years old. And many of these students were then treated with various medications for ADHD for, what could just be that the kids were just not developmentally ready at age 5 to sit in a classroom and listen to the teacher and increasingly be forced to learn to read at age 5 in kindergarten, which was not the case, certainly when we were kids in school, even just a generation ago. And so we're seeing that kind of rise in these labels, as you mentioned. And Professor Peter Gray, who's a psychology professor at Boston College, who wrote the foreword to my Unschooled book, writes about ADHD extensively. And in his Psychology Today blog, he says, what is ADHD? He says, basically, it is a failure to adapt to the conditions of standard schooling. So it's a school problem, not an individual problem. And he has found in his research that when children leave a conventional classroom for various types of self-directed education environments, those issues that are identified as problems within a conventional classroom cease to be problems outside of that classroom, because young people are then able to take control of their own learning and pursue their own interests. And we've talked about this too before, Nick. If we were forced to be in an environment all day long, sitting still, listening to a teacher, doing things that were not meaningful to us, it would be really difficult for us to not be, kind of fidgeting or wanting to get up and move around. And yet we expect this of our children. So this was already kind of in the background for you. You were growing increasingly disillusioned by what you were seeing in the district schools that the girls were attending. And then the COVID response happens. The lockdowns occur beginning in the spring of 2020. And in your district, there's the shift to remote schooling. I wonder if you can talk about what happened in those early days.
Yeah, we went remote, and it was a period of everyone trying to figure what that was going to look like out. So I think me and the wife were patient. We didn't expect great things. We were all just excited that the kids had something to do during the day and among the rest of the uncertainty in the world. But just as that went, we were exposed to just watching them lay on the couch and check into a Zoom meeting or watch a video, and that, like, those were assignments now. And I didn't expect it to be perfect from the beginning, but it never got better, and it never really made any sense. And my kids got more miserable, and like you could just see they were just declining, just mentally and probably spiritually. I mean, it was just not a good situation for them. And then you see the content, and from as parents that were trying to limit screen time and limit that part of their life as they develop their brain, watching videos and then answering questions didn't feel like school to me. So the curriculum started to really just stick out, that didn't make any sense, and they were miserable. I mean, you'd have to get them outside to, at least move their bodies, and it just was not a good environment. It was just an environment of isolation, really. Exactly what the kids don't need at that age. So yeah, it was tough to watch, and it got worse, and there didn't seem to be any movement in the right direction. People weren't making good decisions based on anything. As far as excuse me, what was in the best interest of the kids, it was just what was easier for them or the teachers. So that was very eye-opening for me and my wife.
Yeah, and so the school closures and the shift to remote Zoom school was certainly a catalyst for you, as well as for many other families across the country who really saw that as an opportunity to start exploring other options. And many families began to remove their kids from district schools beginning in 2020 for homeschooling, for private schools that were more likely to reopen for full-time in-person learning than public schools were in many places. There was an increase in charter schools. So families were really starting to take control of their children's education at that time and explore other education options. So what did that look like for you? When did you start to think, well, maybe we have to find something else?
Excuse me. That was 2021, they moved into some sort of hybrid, half remote, half in person, which didn't make any sense. So we started, we started exploring homeschooling. So my wife started researching that. We took a few tours of Montessori type schools on the Cape. And this is all during the school year that was going on in 2021 or 2020. And then we kind of realized that homeschooling was going to be a bit much, and that wasn't really what our strong suits were going to be. And then we also did a visiting week at Sudbury Valley, and I had completely forgotten for most of this alternative school search that I had relatives that went to that school. And it just never really was on the radar because it was so far away. But we knew that's what we kind of wanted. And all the alternative schools we looked at had bits and pieces of that, but it didn't have the full package. It still had, it was like public school light. Like there was a little bit more freedom, but it wasn't the freedom we were looking for. And that's really when we kept drilling down into it. The best thing for my kids we identified was choice, was just freedom to be a kid. That was my only goal of their childhood, was allowing them to be kids. So we did our visiting week up at Sudbury Valley, and my youngest had a great time. My oldest was kind of whatever about it. And then after we discussed it, they initially their issues were, their friends. They were going to have to move away from their friends and start over. So that's obviously not appealing to any kid. But after they thought about it, and they really enjoyed being treated like an adult and having that freedom. And that visiting week was enough to convince me and my wife that it was worth the hour and 15-minute drive each way each day, because you find you're doing all these things to make sure your kid's happy. And if the hardest part is driving, that didn't seem very hard when you looked at it that way for us. So that's how we ended up doing a visiting week, and we signed up the following year to go full time.
And so as the girls started going there full time, what did you discover? How did they react to it? What did they think of it? What was the change that you saw?
The change in my youngest, who was, I guess, 11 going on 12, her first year there, was immediate, because she immediately found a group of friends, immediately fit in. She was so much happier. And I think in her words, she said, I just get to be myself. So I don't know if that was the school or the friend she was with, or probably both, but she was able to identify that and communicate that to us, why she was so happy, which was great. My oldest, it was a slow start, probably 3-4 months in before she started kind of opening up, meeting people, and really taking advantage of the school. So that was a little slower for her as in a transition. She just is not as outgoing as my youngest. But once she hit her stride and had a friend group, the changes were pretty much 180 degrees from happy kids until they went to school. Then they got home, they were miserable, and they would take their days out on each other as soon as they got off the bus, to sisters getting along and being best friends. And I think my wife and I thought we were imagining things, witnessing this, but then every person that knew my girls and knew us would comment on the change. It was visible, it was palpable, just the way they interacted. And that was probably the best metric that we could have ever used. And that's probably the reason, it's the only reason I need to keep going, let's put it that way.
Right. And Sudbury Valley is open 5 days a week, 8:30 to 5, but students are only required to be at school each day for about 5 hours to comply with compulsory schooling laws as a recognized private school. And yet I think you and I will both say that the kids never want to leave at 5 o'clock when the end of the day comes. They want to stay as late as possible, and they look forward to going. And want to be there as much as they can be. Was that also a shock for you?
Yes, it's going from the biggest fight is getting your kids to school to they are fighting with you to stay as late as possible. So I pick the girls up 3 or 4 nights a week, and it's at 5 o'clock. And if they have to leave early for any reason, it's a problem for them because they don't want to miss time with their friends. And when we go on vacations, it's a problem if they have to miss school. So it again, it's that 180 degrees from dreading going to school to dreading vacations, because they just have a place that's theirs. They have fun, and it takes some getting used to as a parent, because I get jealous having not had that as a kid, but I'm really glad they get to spend as much time there as possible.
Right. You've told me that you really want to take a family vacation to Florida one of these days, but the girls don't want to miss school. So that's been the latest discussion that you've had in the family, which is a good problem to have, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, I wonder if you kind of thought about this would have been an amazing experience for you if you had gone to a school like this, especially where it sounded like, identify with some of the issues that your younger daughter had with being very energetic and wanting to have that freedom and that autonomy that was sometimes stifled in school for you, based on whichever teacher you had. What do you think that experience would have been like if you were able to learn in a self-directed environment like Sudbury Valley?
Well, I would say I probably would have gotten to the place at my mid 40s a lot sooner, just in figuring out who the hell I am. And just to go back to your Harvard survey, I mean, that was me. I was supposed to be in a grade lower, and because me and my sister were so close in age, my mom bumped me up a grade. So I fit that mold as far as being really young for my grade. I graduated high school at 17. But yeah, I think I would be who I am now, but I would have started that a lot earlier, because I'm at my point in my life where most of my life I didn't like to read. And now I want to learn, I want to read, and I'm just reading books now. And I think that's probably how it would have went if I wasn't forced to learn things at school. And when my interest is perked, I'm tenacious. I want to learn. I don't really practice moderation when I do things. So I think that would have served me really well as a kid to be able to just stick with something, work with my hands, do something, be outside, not have to sit in the most uncomfortable chairs with the most boring content being shoved down your throat, and and then getting in trouble for socializing. I mean, God forbid you talk to your other friends. So yeah, I think I probably would have arrived where I am now a lot sooner had I had the freedom and just the opportunities to go to a school like that.
Yeah, Sudbury Valley, it's a special place. It's mixed age. It has kids from ages 4 to 18, and they're free to be around whoever they want. It's sort of building authentic relationships and friendships based on shared interests instead of these age segregated classrooms that we're all accustomed to in conventional schools. There's no curriculum expectations. There's no required classes. There's no evaluation. It's really nothing like a traditional school. There's lots of resources available to young people there if they want to take advantage of them, a beautiful art studio and music rooms and adult staff members who are there to help and answer questions. There's 10 acres of a beautiful campus, and it's all about 1/4 of the price tag of a traditional private school and half of the per pupil expenditure in the city's public school of Framingham, Massachusetts, where it's located. But it is a leap for, I think, a lot of families who are not accustomed to this kind of bottom-up approach to learning, where young people are in charge of their own education and they're treated as equals. The tagline for Sudbury Valley is "Kids are people." They're treated with that same respect that we would give to adults to other adults. They're not talked down to. But that's something that I think is probably hard for a lot of families who haven't thought about alternative education to really wrap their arms around and get a sense of what that's like. What was that like for you in going to this new kind of learning environment?
Well, for me, it was a little different only because the kids had a base at public school, so they could read, they could do most everything at that age. So that wasn't, I didn't have those concerns about, oh, what about math or all that stuff. But as the kids went and did whatever they wanted to do during the day, you would get this old public school muscle memory of, oh, they're not learning anything and is this okay? And then you would just be surprised when my oldest would say, I'm learning Japanese, and she's working with a friend learning Japanese, and my youngest is drawing and doing things that she wants to do. And so when you witness the traditional learning that's actually going on in addition to the non-traditional learning, that made it easy for us. And when I look at the kids there and I talk to them that have been there, that have not been in public school, what strikes me is these kids are going to have opportunities in their life that normal public school kids might miss out on. And it's not because they are teaching themselves things or anything. It's just they're learning how to navigate the world. They're learning how to talk to adults. They're learning how to talk to kids older than them, younger than them. And they stick out like a sore thumb to me when the kids just look you in the eye and speak to you. They're not intimidated by you. They ask intelligent questions. They're not just, yes men like the public school pumps out. So I just feel like those kids are at such an advantage to be able to just have opportunities fall in their lap because they are so interesting, because they're allowed to be themselves. They're not worried about consequences of asking a question. One of the best examples, I had one of the girl's friend over, and we were driving and I was talking and I said something, I made a statement, and he asked me, he just said, "How so?" And I thought that was just amazing, because here I am, a parent, saying something that should just be accepted. It shouldn't be, but kids just, oh, okay. And he just asked me why. And I was like, man, that's awesome. And I explained why. And I just left that car ride going, that kid's set. If he can do that at age 12, and if God bless, if I can do that for my girls, where they just ask why and are able to just not be just told what to do and just express some critical thought. I thought that was amazing. And I think that's what happens at that school, because you're in an environment where that's okay. It's encouraged. You're not going to be a distraction, or you're not going to be a threat to a teacher if you start questioning the almighty wisdom of the curriculum.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Sudbury Valley was founded, as I said, in 1968, really before this technological revolution that we've had over the past couple of decades. And it seems even more relevant today in many ways as an educational model than even in the 1960s, where not only is knowledge now literally at our fingertips, we're able to learn almost anything and have a wide variety of choices when it comes to how, what, with whom, from whom we learn. But it's also the fact that now, as we continue to or increasingly compete with robots and artificial intelligence, it's important to think about what separates human intelligence from artificial intelligence. And I often say it's things like creativity and curiosity and inquisitiveness and this entrepreneurial spirit, this kind of personal autonomy and agency that separates humans from robots. And yet in a conventional classroom that's much more focused on that kind of robotic memorization and regurgitation of information, and curiosity and creativity can often become a liability in a traditional classroom, whereas in a self-directed environment like Sudbury Valley, that's expected and celebrated. And I think you're right that these are the kids who will go out into the world continuing to ask questions and chart their own course. There's been studies done by both Sudbury Valley School as well as outside researchers on outcomes of Sudbury Valley School alumni, as well as other Sudbury School alumni and unschoolers more broadly. And they found that students are able to really take any path that they want in life. Sudbury Valley has found that most of its graduates, the vast majority who choose to attend higher education, are able to do so and often get into their first choice college, even though they don't have a typical transcript or any kind of what we would think of conventional metrics of educational attainment. And interestingly, most of these graduates become entrepreneurs or are involved in sort of entrepreneurial endeavors that are tied to their interests, many of which developed in childhood or adolescence. I wonder if you think about, kind of the future for your girls. What do you think about life after Sudbury Valley for them in a few years? What will that be like?
Well, hopefully if I do my job, it'll be whatever they want it to be. I mean, my biggest concern as a parent and my goal for their education was one, to let them be kids, let the kids be kids. But I need them to develop critical thought, skepticism, and just a toolkit to navigate this world. Like you mentioned with technology, I mean, one of my big concerns is, the social media and everything else, that we've gotten so good at selling a lifestyle or an influence or a product to people. These poor kids don't stand a chance if they can't think for themselves, ask a simple question, understand what is going on and why people are trying to get you to act a certain way, buy a certain product. That whole influence part, I think, is very important to understand. So if they can do that, and I think the school's the best way to do that, then they can do whatever they want, because they'll have the confidence to, whether it's draw, like my youngest is a pretty good artist. I don't know if she wants to do some with that or who knows what, but I know she'll have the confidence already built in, and it's not surprising that the graduates of that school do whatever they want on their own, because from the time they got there, they were encouraged to take chances and learn that part. And because public school just beat that out of you, and you have no opportunity to even do that. So I'm hoping when they're done with school, they'll have a good idea of what gives them purpose in their life and what they want to do for fun, and give them and have the confidence to try new things and take chances. really, as a dad, if they can think critically, take care of themselves, I will be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, Nick, that you drive over an hour, you and your wife each way every day to attend Sudbury Valley. Our family drives 45 minutes from the city each way. There are people who relocate from across the country so their kids can attend Sudbury Valley School. There's people who even cross oceans from other countries to be at Sudbury Valley. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, why do you think it's so special, especially if there's someone listening who says, why should I make these kinds of sacrifices to have my kid go to a self-directed environment like Sudbury Valley? Is it really that much better? Is it really that different? Is it really worth the time, the money, the energy to go to a place like that? What would you say?
Well, I would say, any normal person that's listening to your podcast obviously cares about their kids, So if you're listening to this and you're wondering, is it worth it or not? What would you pay to have your kids happy? We're so interested in buying stuff to fix our problems. How much money would you spend to have happy kids? And I think most parents would say whatever it took, because that's ultimately the goal, and that's your role as a parent. So if it's having to drive a distance or move your house temporarily, it feels like it's a big thing. But I think if it feels too big, then you're losing sight of what the goal is. If the goal is to give your kids the best chance to succeed, and have a good education, or at least a good foundation to be a good human, I don't think it's that big a deal. If you said to me, Nick, all you have to do is drive an hour and your kids will get along and they'll have the best chance to have a good education, I'll take that all day long. So, that's just another thing about our conditioning from public school and everything else. It's, you put them in a group, and all of a sudden we got limitations, and everything seems and feels too big to do. And it did feel big when we made the change. And every freaking day when I get to spend an hour with my girls and talk in the car and just hear about their day, I get upset we didn't do it early. So it's just one of those things that every day I'm reinforced that we made the right decision, just based on how happy they are, the progress they're making, the social situations they get to be in, the great people there, and the younger kids and the older kids that they're learning from. It's just, there's nothing but positives, and the negative is paying for gas and taking time out of your day to drive. So it's not even a debate.
But Nick, what about trigonometry? Right? This is what we hear all the times. There's always the concern with self-directed education when it's not top down and it doesn't look like a conventional classroom or curriculum. How are they going to learn trigonometry or calculus, or won't there be gaps? And won't this sort of hold them back? Right. And some of that, I'm sure, is just families wanting to make sure that they are doing right by their children. They want their kids to have every possible opportunity for success. So what would you say to people worried about not following that script that we've been handed of what education should look like?
Well, I think the thing that helped me was when that occurs, when that whataboutism starts, I just laugh, because you're missing the point. What if a spaceship lands? That's what you think you know about education is irrelevant for what experience your kid is trying to have right now. So you do think of it as a parent, and when you're making a switch from public school where all they know is these classes, you wonder about that. And then I don't know, I just look at my life during the day. Trigonometry doesn't play a role in my world. And you know what? If my kid was into trigonometry, there are resources there to learn it and to get better at it, if that's the thing. So I think the what about this, what about that, if you drill down into it a little bit more, they have the opportunity to learn whatever they want. So it's not like that's not going to happen if they go to this school. So I think that's just it's our muscle memory as parents, and I mean that's everything we know about school is from our school. Like, so we grew up, our parents and everything else, we know this model so well that I think it's just bad habits worrying about some subject that they might not get. I mean, I went to public school. I don't know what percentage of what I learned I'm still using. I still have a couple of Spanish vocab words I remember from 7th grade. I remember some math that I need, that I use in my daily life, but the game's changed. These kids got supercomputers in their pockets. Like, we don't need to write cursive. We don't need spelling class. You know, these kids will sort it out. And I think having the confidence to follow whatever they want to do, they'll learn the skills necessary to do those things. You know, if trigonometry is part of their goal, then will learn it. And if it's not, good, you read a book, do something fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. I too went to K-12 public schools, and also remember very little from that experience as well. And I think you're right that as an adult, when we think about how we pursue knowledge and learn things, when we can reconnect with those natural drives for curiosity and discovery that young children have that often get dulled in a conventional classroom. But when we can reconnect with that as an adult, we're able to learn in the same ways that now you and I are enabling our children to learn, which is using the tools and resources of their culture and, technology, books, other people, peers, educators. All of that can help them get what they need for whatever goal they have. And you're right, if trigonometry is part of that goal, they will learn it and they will be successful in learning it because it will be driven by their own interests and goals. And so, Nick, I guess as we wrap up, I'm curious to think about or to hear about your perspective on the future of American education. Do you think that we will see a change and a shift toward more of these alternative learning models, and especially self-directed, non-coercive education models? And how do you see kind of the dominant public school system faring in the coming years?
Well, God, I hope so. I hope we see more people going into this direction, because we know the old model doesn't work for most people. It can't mathematically. It cannot work, and I think once people realize that their kids should be happy, that's something I picked up from one of your early podcasts. That really, I wish I heard that earlier in my life, because your kids are supposed to be happy, right? And the fact that they're not should tell you a lot about what's causing the anxiety and the unhappiness. It's probably not your parenting. It's probably not a lot of things that you may think it is. I think it is school, because I witnessed firsthand kids go from being very anxious and just got a lot going on their shoulders. And once school was removed, that was the only thing we changed. And all of a sudden they're smiling. And I guess you never appreciate a smiling kid till unless you had a frowny kid for a while. So I really hope the change is made, and that's going to depend on the parents. The parents are going to have to realize that they're not going to get what they want from public school. Now, there are kids that should go to public school. There are kids that fit in great, and there's sports, and there's all these things that there are pros to public school. When I asked my girls what it was recess and lunch, and it was the times they get to hang out with their friends. So I think the things that are important to the kids and important to us are very different. And public school will never get better. There's no incentive to make it better, right? It will never happen the way it's currently funded and currently handled. So I'm not optimistic about that changing in the better direction. The best chance we have is the parents voting with their wallets, going to better schools, removing the funding from the towns and the states, and then force them to relook at things. People only take action when they lose customers. So right now, the government's in the business of school, and their business sucks. and people should go elsewhere. And I don't think it'll change till more people do that.
Nick Warren, thank you again for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate it. And keep up the good work.